Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our International Women's Day for 2021. It's great to see many of you here, and we expect another 150 or so. So thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. And, first and foremost, we want to celebrate all our wonderful, amazing women for the great and fantastic things you do. You make the world a better place. So thank you. My name is Charles Kwakodre, delighted to be the Chief Officer for the Caribbean African Health Network. I will look after you for the next 30 minutes until my co-host Yvonne Cargill joins us. So welcome once again. A quick few things. Please use the chat box throughout the event. If you have any comments, if you have any feedback. We did also set up a Slido. I'm not sure if you've seen that, but not to worry at all. You're more than welcome to use the chat box. There will be a plenary at the end, and we will try and answer as many questions as possible. It's a very packed 2 hours, and we're hoping to be very efficient with time. And, as well, because some of the topics that will come up are quite, sensitive, we will also, we do have, trained counselors on site as well. So feel free, message any of the co-hosts or myself, and, we will get a breakout room if you need any support because of some of the stuff that comes out from today. But once again, great to see you all. Last year, by this time, we were at the Gotham Monastery, and it was great to see lots of people buzzing, after the teas and coffees and biscuits. But I'm sure you have yours ready now, and we can connect virtually. So thanks, everyone. The pleasure is mine at this point to hand over to an amazing woman, one who was the brain behind CAHN, her PhD, which, CAHN superseded, and CAHN was set up even before the PhD was submitted. But we're really delighted that after giving much time to the organization, she did manage to submit it at the end of October and, passed the Viva 2 weeks ago. So congratulations, Faye Bruce, amazing chair. Thanks for all your support, and over to you to do your welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this really important event. Just to say happy International Women's Day. I love these days, just focused on women and all that we contribute to society. So if you look at your programme, we'll be celebrating women, and we'll be having a moment out for some therapy. I thought it'd be really good just to have, just 2 minutes of therapy, because we often find that we don't tend to do that relaxation. So just a little bit of time out. We'll also have some motivational speakers and some great singing that you'll hear as well. But at the same time, and this is a really important part of my work, is looking at a large section of the Black community. That all's not well with the Black community in terms of their maternal experiences. Black women are dying more than any other racial or ethnic group in the country. And there are also many more near misses that we hear about anecdotally that we want to highlight and to do something about. So as Charles said, last year we hosted International Women's Day and focused on maternal and infant mortality, because we know with infant mortality, Black babies are also 121% more likely to die in the first 28 days. This event this year will really look at some of the experiences of our women, and we've captured 4 case studies of women's experiences as they've journeyed through their pregnancies. And just to say that, Charles has mentioned the PhD, but the PhD look very generally at health inequalities. And we have a lot of data that shows, CVD, diabetes, obesity, all those kind of things are prevalent. What we don't know is what's sustaining those health inequalities. So we want this year to kind of dig behind some of that data and understand what's actually going on. So basically, we've got lots of keynote speakers. They'll highlight a number of different aspects of, what is actually going on and what can we do as a system and as individuals to make that experience better. So I just urge us all to take some time and to think about what we can do as a health service or individual to make things better for those around us in work and our daily lives. and what we can do to make those maternal experiences much more better for Black and marginalised women. So it's not just Black women, it's also Asian women and other minority women as well. So in my role as chair for CAHN, I will do all I can to bring to the fore those health inequalities and to look at actions as well that we can do. Also, you know, in my role as Greater Manchester and Eastern Cheshire co-chair for the maternity work stream, and also on the Race and Observatory panel as a stakeholder. Lots of roles that I have within maternity, really passionate about addressing these health inequalities, and I'm really pleased that you're all here today to hear about what we can all do to support that. So thank you for listening, and I'm going to hand back to Charles.
Thanks for that, Faye Bruce, amazing chair. At this point in time, before we crack on, we have been joined by the Vice Lieutenant, you know, on behalf of the Lord Lieutenant for Greater Manchester, and Mrs. Shaman Bartels. I wonder if you want to say a few words.
Yes, I'm happy to say that. First of all, I'd like to say many thanks for your invitation. I'm delighted to be joining you, especially today, in order to celebrate International Women's Day. I'm told that the earliest Women's Day was recorded in New York in 1909. Since then, there have been various formats, but all of them have been used as a strategy to promote equal rights for what we all know is most definitely the stronger sex. In 2016, a pledge for parity was published, but still progress is slow. Social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women are not always matched by equality for women. I firmly believe, however, that success and parity must come from us. We mustn't wait for men to allow it. I've always tried to live by the maxim, carpe diem, seize the day, and my own personal mantra is, I am strong, I am invincible. Those of you old enough to remember Helen Reddy's song, I Am Woman, will recognise those words. When I was growing up in the 1960s, I never really gave much thought to equality. I had no need to. I was the youngest of 4 girls, and Mum always ruled the roost. Dad was the kindest, fairest sort of man who cared only that the women in his life were happy. I went to an all-girls school, and whilst we certainly had some male teachers, the majority were accomplished and inspirational women who taught me that in addition to the academic subjects, it is vital to have principles and to stick to them. To have respect for each other, pride in oneself, a true sense of right and wrong, to care for others, particularly those less resilient, but above all, to have confidence and a determination to succeed. Again, in all honesty, I didn't really have any cause to think about equality with such marvellous role models. However, inequality suddenly did become an issue when I moved into the workplace. And I found it extremely difficult for women to be taken seriously, certainly in the world of banking. It was a rude awakening to find that female staff were required to learn to type, and unlike the men, were not encouraged to take banking exams. Fortunately for me, my role models thus far, my mum, my sisters and teachers, gave me the tools with which to push back, and so I was determined to succeed. Not just because I was a female, but because I was a strong, confident and proud person. If I was told there was something I couldn't do, then I just worked even harder. And so it was that in 1997, I ended my career at the bank as a senior manager with responsibility for over 70 staff and a £6 million budget. Not too bad for somebody who was forced to learn to type. Whilst things have changed drastically since then, I don't believe for 1 minute that equality for women is yet the norm. We women still have to push harder to be recognised in almost any field you care to think about. That is why self-belief is so important. Women must always think big and have high expectations of themselves. They must never accept less than they know they deserve. Have I been held back because I'm a woman? I don't believe so. I enjoy and celebrate being a woman. The various women's movements have been instrumental in changing attitudes, but women themselves and their approaches are the most important elements. There is no reason to hate men. We don't need to behave like them, and we don't have to reject them. We certainly don't have to prove ourselves to them. We already know we are superior. Be proud to be feminine and use those talents. Don't work against them. It is true that there are still some dinosaurs out there, but I have been most fortunate in my life to meet many enlightened people who were happy to help me to succeed in many ways. I have to say that one of the most enlightened men in Greater Manchester is the Lord Lieutenant Sir Warren Smith. I do understand that not all of us can be forceful and assertive, and some cultures are slower to adapt to the idea of equality. But we women can all believe in ourselves and be committed to our own personal successes. We have much to give, and there is nothing we can't do as long as we want it badly enough. Never forget, the only limits are those that we impose on ourselves. And finally, always remember, it is attitude, not aptitude, that helps us reach altitude. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Vice Lieutenant Mrs. Shaman Bartels. Thanks for all your support, and over the years you've been amazing, and we're delighted to have you on the event today. I'm now going to introduce Director Maynard Hampson, who will do 2 minutes of relaxation just to get us into the mood. But remember, we're celebrating our amazing women for all the great stuff they do. So over to you, Doreza.
Well, thank you. Can you all hear me well? Can you hear me? Great, that's great. Okay, welcome to International Women's Week with CAHN, International Women's Day. We're going to be doing a body posture check. So it's a BPB check-in. This is your body posture and breathing check-in. So every morning when you wake up, guys, I want you to be doing these check-ins on your body. Do them in the morning, when you're in your bed, when you're standing, when you're lying down. So you're going to stand. So what we're going to look at first, we're going to look at our head. Be aware of your body. Check in with your body. Now let's look at the forehead. Is it frowning? If there's a frown, let's remove the frown. So take the eyebrows up and down with the eyebrows. Just release the tension around the forehead. Good. Now we're going to look at the eyes. Are the eyes drooping? Are they feeling tired? Let's close the eyes, blink a few times to bring some moisture to the eyes. Let's wake the eyes up. So let's blink a few times, 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we're going to close the eyes and we're going to look to the right. Keep the eyes closed, then look to the left. Then look back to the right, then back to the left. Come back to the center. We're now going to take the eyes to the right, then up, then left, then down. That's making the eyes do a circular movement. So we're actually working the eyelids as we're taking the eyes round and also strengthening the muscles in the eyes, relaxing the eyes. So let's look to the right, look down, look up, sorry. Look to the left, then look down. And repeat, look to the right, look up, to the left, then look down. And let's go in the opposite direction. To the left, look up, look right, look down. One more time. To the left, look up, look right, look down. So your eyes are going around. If I can keep my eyes open and show you how they go around, you'll feel that. You'll feel the eye sockets moving as you're taking the eye around. You're releasing any tension. Let's come down to the jaw and the chin. What does that look like in the morning? Oh my gosh, it's like this. If you're jutting out that chin, if your mouth is slanted down, let's pull it back. So let's pull the chin back. So we're here. So instead of here, pull it back. Drop the chin, keep it square, so that if I do this, I have a square. Good. And then we're going to round the mouth inside as if we have a gobstopper in there. So imagine you have a gobstopper in your mouth, so it looks like this. And we're going to move that airy gobstopper around the cheeks, up and down. And if you feel like yawning, that's a good thing. So yawn. But let's do that movement. So we got this gobstopper inside the mouth. And now we're going to open the mouth and just really open wide, and then take the cheeks back, then bring it back together. Open wide, then smile, big smile. Are your teeth still gritting together? If your teeth are gritting together, you're not doing it right. We don't want to have those teeth gritted down. We want to release those teeth and take it away. Good. And let's move down to the shoulders and the neck. Okay. Does your head feel heavy? Are you sitting like this all through the day? Let's sit up. Make sure you're sat on both butt cheeks. Both parts of your bottom is sat nicely, firmly, evenly on the chair. You don't want to be seating to the side. So sit up nice and tall. Both feet flat on the floor. Don't want to arch the back. Lift the chest. Keep that chin square. And we're going to take the head and just gently look over to the left. Come back to the center. If you want to close your eyes, you can do. Gently take it to the right. Come back to the center. One more on each side. Gently turn the head. We don't want to force it, so just turning the head, because we want to feel that stretch and that releasing any tension in the neck. Come back to the center and then take it to the right. As we come back to the center, we're now going to look towards the ceiling, a nice smooth movement. Neutral spine, and then bring the head back down. This time take the chin to the chest. And again, control, nice and smooth. And back to the center. This time we're going to take the ears to the shoulders. We don't want the shoulders up here, so keep the shoulders down. So we roll the shoulders back, lift the chest, and drop the head to the ear. Don't lift your shoulders up, just drop the head to the ear. Good. If you need some help, just hold onto the head gently and gently pull it down and feel that stretch. And up. Then over to the other side. If you need some support, you can gently pull it. And then sit tall. Are the shoulders up here? Let's take the shoulders up and down.
Loretta, sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt.
Okay.
You know, yeah, if you enjoyed what you've seen so far, you know, we have a session tomorrow evening. Please do join in. And you know, I'm sure you have much more of that. Great. I'm sorry to move us on.
That's fine. Okay. Well done, guys.
Dan Madel, who is a governance practitioner by profession, an award-winning businesswoman, accomplished professional speaker. But also, we all know Dan Madel being an Olympian, and she currently chairs, you know, our mayor and the Burnham's young people's task force, engaging with young people and, you know, putting together what will help them, but also engaging with the wider system, wider partners. I'm going to hand over to Dan, you know, to say a few words. Over to you, Dan.
Thank you, Faye, and thank you, Charles, for the opportunity to be joining with you this morning. Doretta, that was amazing. Thank you. I feel so much better, so much more relaxed after doing that. Thank you for that. It was really good. So when Charles asked me to speak this morning, I wasn't entirely sure on what I should speak about. So I was thinking, what would I like to share? He gave me the title of Celebrating Women. If I were going to celebrate any woman, it would have to be my mother, Lena Constance Edwards, who came over from Jamaica in the 1950s with my dad, settled here, made a life for herself and our family. So I'm one of 4 girls and 2 boys. There's 7 of us in our family altogether. I'm the youngest of 7. And I was thinking, how do I use my time more effectively? And I came up with this 4 key things I would like to share with you that I have learned over my period of being a sports person, but also a businesswoman. The first is not knowing what you want is not okay. Not knowing what you want is not okay. That's important because as women, we often have such a multifaceted role and roles that we lose, or there is an opportunity for us to lose a sense of purpose, who we are, what do we want, and where are we headed. It's not necessarily about what it is that you want. It's about knowing that you've got something to hold on to that allows you to jump out of bed in the morning. It's the vision. It's hanging on to that thing when life gets tough. That was the first one I wanted to share with you. And for me, knowing what I wanted as a kid was I wanted to be one of the best runners in the world. But once I retired, I wanted to use my transferable skills to give back to my community. The second is winning is never guaranteed. Winning doesn't necessarily mean medals, standing on rostrums, getting cheers and applause from a packed stadium. Winning is about being the best version of yourself. So what does that look like? What does that mean for you? How do you win on an everyday basis so that you feel good, so that you're thriving, so that you are reaching your potential? Winning might never be guaranteed, but knowing what you want to win is really important. The third area was sport is the hidden social worker in our communities. That's what I've learned over the last 10 years in my career as an athlete, but also as a businesswoman. Why do I say that? Well, the young people that we come in touch with on a daily basis reveal to us so many things about their challenges, their hopes, their aspirations, and it gives us an opportunity to then provide solutions for those young people. And from a personal point of view, having that opportunity and that privilege to be around young people has, for me, as a female, as a woman, lifts me up. It fills me with energy and hope because I'm in a position to support the next generation. I said there were 4 things. The last thing is, each of us will experience moments in life that absolutely change the course of direction and the way we view the world. That happened to me when I was falsely accused of cheating and taking performance-enhancing drugs. It knocked me out. It changed the person who I was then, but it's actually made me the person who I am today. And what I wanted to share with you is just to remember, when the chips are down, when the odds are against us, we've got the strength, we've got the power, we've got the resilience to keep going and to keep bouncing back. And finally, I was just thinking about how oftentimes I have been underestimated throughout the whole of my career. Many of you might have experienced that yourselves, but I always hang on to this one thing that a colleague said to me, Jeff Thompson, who's the CEO of the Youth Charter for Sport. You might know him. I was sharing with him a difficult time I was going through, and he said, Di, he said, You are the shrewdest dumb blonde I know. I'm neither blonde, and I hope that I'm not dumb. I like to think I'm not dumb. But the word that jumped out to me was shrewd. Hang on in there. Keep listening, keep focusing on who you are. And whilst people may underestimate who you are, continue to believe in yourself, stand firm in who you are and what you want to achieve. Charles, I don't know whether that was what you were expecting from me or what you would want me to impart, but they were the 4 things that I wanted to share with the group, with the team, in terms of celebrating women. So have a brilliant International Women's Day, ladies. We deserve it.
Great. Thanks a lot, Diane. You're always on point. You're always spot on. And thanks for sharing your heart with us all. We're really grateful. And it's fantastic to see the theme coming out from, our Vice Lieutenant, from Faye herself, the challenges. And I always say, I have greater respect for my mom. Had it not been her, I don't think I'll be where I am today. So Mom in Ghana, love you loads. At this point in time, I'm going to hand over to another amazing woman. She makes sure that, babies, whether they're premature, are safe. She also happens to be our own medical lead. She's been there right from the launch event of CAHN. And it's not just herself, but her mom, her daughter, her husband, and, wider family. Our amazing Dr. Ngozi Ediosagi to share on experiences of mothers on the front line. Over to you, Ngozi.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for that introduction, Charles. It's undeserving, but I love being a part of the Caribbean African Health Network. So for me, it's a privilege. And I'm delighted to be here today celebrating International Women's Day. And also to be sharing a platform with a number of individuals who are really committed to improving the experiences of women in our society. I'd also like to say a big thank you to those of you who've logged on to listen to us today. It's really a day to celebrate women's achievements, but also to think about what we can continue to do to make progress. I was actually quite surprised to find that International Women's Day has been celebrated since the beginning of the 1900s. And yet, sadly, we still have marginalized women, women whose voices aren't heard. And unfortunately, we know that the health outcomes for Black women are suboptimal, Black women and their babies. But what a year it has been. I remember a year ago, we were celebrating International Women's Day at a very, very cold Gorton monastery, where we were treated to a lovely meal at the end of the presentations. Now this year, it's a bit different. No meal, no opportunity to network, but hopefully you'll find today just as engaging, even though we're on Zoom. And I loved your session, Director, as well. I was getting into the groove, and I will hopefully be joining you later on this week. But I'm desperately hoping that we have made enough progress with vaccines that this time next year, we'll be back to some normality and have an opportunity for a nice meal when we're celebrating next year's International Women's Day. This pandemic has not only been devastating in terms of COVID-related health outcomes, it has also, I feel, set gender equality back in quite a significant way. Domestic violence has increased. There have been job losses for everyone, but it's affected women much more than men. And I know, speaking to friends, relatives, people I come across, that we've reverted a lot to gender stereotypes, with the bulk of childcare, household chores, caring for elderly relatives falling back to women. Now, prior to the pandemic, we were all aware that health outcomes for Black women and their babies were worse than white women and white babies. They have more ill health and they're more likely to die. Now, the reasons for this are not fully understood, but if you have a look at the flyer for today's event, it describes some of the problems really well. So please have a read when you have an opportunity if you haven't read it. You know, for me, 2020 will not only be remembered for the pandemic, but for the way it exposed the pre-existing inequalities in the health of Black people, and also the disproportionate effect it's had on Black women who were pregnant as well. So that's what's happened. But one of the reasons why we're here today is to discuss what can be done. Now, many of you will have heard of the fact that women do worse in pregnancy, and that was exposed in part by something called Embrace. And Embrace is mothers and babies who are reducing risk through audit and confidential inquiries across the UK through a confidential inquiry where they look at different aspects of outcomes. And I'm really pleased to say that next year's inquiry is going to focus completely on Black women and the outcomes of their babies. And I'm delighted that I'll be part of that expert panel. And hopefully that should provide a more objective narrative on why Black women and babies are worse off, and also provide a platform for change. What else can we do? We can support CAHN with our time and expertise and all their projects that they're doing, and come along to things like this. And, you know, all of us have a role to play in this. And so if there are things that you come across that you would like CAHN to look into or be involved in, please let them know. This year's International Women's Day is Choose to Challenge. And that means all of us, because legislation will only go so far. We have to challenge historical, cultural, and yes, religious stereotypes that many of these are perpetuated to hold women back. You know them, I know them, but we cannot be passive bystanders and think that it's somebody else's problem. We've all got to call out gender bias and inequalities. I've been really fortunate to have really strong female role models in my home. I was brought up by a strong West Indian grandmother and mother. But I was also fortunate to have a father who believed in equality for women. He treated all 4 of his children, 2 males and 2 females, exactly the same. But my take on this is that I want us all to step up and speak up, because all of us need to be involved to make a difference. Now, we've got a really packed agenda, so I'm not going to say any more, and I'm going to hand it back to Charles to get on with this fantastic day. Thank you all for listening.
Thanks very much, Ngozi. You are amazing, as always. At this point in time, I was going to introduce Dr. Joseph, but Yvonne Cargill is on, so I'm going to introduce her. Then she could, you know, take over and introduce, you know, Dr. Joseph. So Yvonne Cargill Cbe, she commenced her nurse training at Central Middlesex Hospital in 1997. She was awarded in 2018 the Fellowship of the Royal College of Nursing, and she had a CBE, you know, in the Queen's Birthday honors list. And you know, she's done some amazing stuff. She looked after the RES, you know, Workforce Race Equality Strategy for NHS-EI, and currently she is the advisor to the NHS Race and Health Observatory. So Yvonne, delighted to have you. Over to you.
Gosh, I hope you guys can hear me, but I'm looking at my video and it's not working. I don't know what's happened here, but my video doesn't seem to be working this morning, but people can hear my voice, right? Oh gosh, I'm so sorry that you can't see me. I don't know what has happened here. It says that the video is playing, but I can't see myself, and I'm sure that you can't see me either. So I'm just going to continue on anyway. And just thank you, Charles, for inviting me on this fantastic day, International Women's Day. It is a day, I think, for all of us to reflect on what it's like to be a woman, and particularly, I think, having listened probably for most of the morning to what's happened to a woman of colour like myself, called Meghan Markle. And not only because she is a woman of colour, though people have said that they didn't realise that she was, interesting, I think, but the fact that she is expecting her 2nd child. And I have experienced myself in the past, and it was only for 24 hours, I'll tell you, being trolled. So I wrote something about Meghan when she first left England with her husband. I wrote something on Twitter about her. And Piers Morgan, who some of you may or may not know, actually commented on the tweet that I made. And his followers decided that they were going to have a real go. And for 24 to 48 hours, I was subjected to trolling. And I have to tell you, if you've never experienced it, it is the worst thing ever. Now, this woman who came into this country and married into that family has experienced that for nearly 2 or 3 years, constantly, whilst she was going through her first pregnancy, and still now that she's going through her second pregnancy. And then we wonder why we have the levels of people dying or having problems with their babies because they are Black. And I think that we really do have to remember and hold on to some of those things. I know it's not the nicest conversation and the happiest thing for us to be talking about this morning, but actually, I think it's one of the things that we need to remember. And I'm not going to take up any more time just talking about all of this, but I'm just pleased to be here and to move on with the programme. I understand we're running a tiny bit late, and apologies from me for coming in a little bit late, but I had another meeting to attend. And I managed just to hear the tail end of Ngozi talking, and I thought that was fantastic. And the next thing we're going to be hearing on the agenda is a recorded video. And it's about the voices of Black women. So, Charles, over to you.
My pregnancy was a very long 9 months. I don't feel that I was very prepared at all. I think I did a lot of antenatal classes because they were prepared, they were given to us. But then the other classes, like around birthing and different things like that, I think they told me about 2 days before my due date to go to one for a relaxation class. And I was very anxious. So I don't feel like I was prepared. And it also resulted in me having to be induced as well, which I would have liked to have learned a bit more about before I sort of was put into that position. But then around 6 months, I started to realise that I was quite pregnant and that this was like a really precious life to me that was growing inside me. And I knew then, I became quite maybe an over anxious pregnant lady then, because I just wanted to make sure that he arrived safely. And that I would be able to care for him and I'd be safe as well, which suddenly changed. And I suddenly realised that when I got closer to having him, that it might not be as safe for him. We might not have a safe arrival and things. So that was quite difficult. Before he was due, I ended up in hospital because my blood pressure had gone up and they thought there was a protein in my urine, so they sent me in. And I ended up being kept in hospital, but nobody came to me. They just sort of left me in a bay on my own, and I didn't see anybody for about 4 hours. So I remember phoning my partner, and he phoned the ward to say, she's supposed to be being monitored, could somebody check on her? And they were just really, really awful. And I wish I hadn't asked for that, because I felt then that I was the burden, and maybe, I shouldn't have really complained, but I just was aware that I was supposed to be in there to be monitored with my blood pressure, and nobody had come to see me for like 4 hours. So, but obviously now that I've read around things, it was quite normal, some of the things that were going on for me with the higher blood pressure. And obviously I had a raised BMI, which is obviously always going to be a risk as well. So I felt as though because I had this raised BMI, it was my fault, that with the blood pressure and things, and they sort of were quite open to make me feel that way. And when you're that far pregnant, you sort of realise, I can't suddenly change this now. I can't, go back 9 months and not have a higher BMI. So it was, a bit scary, really, daunting, because then they start throwing all the risks at you that maybe I didn't have further along, like earlier on in the pregnancy, the risks that weren't told to me as such. Because I'd never been pregnant before, and it was a surprise, I probably hadn't read things up as much. And I didn't have many friends at the time that had children either, so it wasn't really something I could talk to about with lots of people. so yeah, I think I just like plodded along with all these worries going on in my head. So in hospital with the high blood pressure, and I did ask for them to like come to me after my partner had made the phone call. They came to me and basically said, like, can you not hear that there's women giving birth on this ward? And I was like, yes, yeah. And I just felt bad then. I didn't dare ask. It was like I wasn't allowed to ask, and there was people that were suffering or people that needed their care more than me. So that sort of continued until I went go into the labour, and then I was pretty much in the same position where I still didn't dare ask a question to anybody or sort of say, you know, I'm a bit scared. I've never done this before. I don't know. I just felt like anything that I was concerned about, it was like, here she is moaning, you know. I don't know. I felt like I wasn't believed, or I didn't dare say if I had pain as such or anything like that, because I was sort of dismissed a bit more. And I think there was 2 other ladies in the bay, and I just felt completely like alien compared to them, and not like, I don't know. I tried to talk with them and things, but I just sort of felt like they were all like either waiting to have their baby, they were further along, but they were quite open and asked questions to the midwives, and the midwife staff were brilliant with them, whereas me, I just felt like it was like they just didn't really want to talk to me. And I was of a different ethnicity, and there was, thinking about it now, there was no other midwives of any other ethnicity, and I mean, it might, I don't know. I know that sometimes we are judged as like, we sometimes are more dramatic about pain because that's been documented in some things. So I suppose sometimes they just thought, oh, she's moaning, or maybe they thought, well, it's a real high blood pressure because of your eyes higher. Sometimes I think because there's lots of stereotypes that are sometimes put towards ethnic minorities, that maybe that's what was the problem in the trust that I had my little boy in. So I don't know, that's what I like to think, that maybe they were just stereotyping, but I just think everyone deserves like individual care, because, you know, everybody's so different. We can't all be like, we can't say, you know, she's going to be really dramatic, she's going to lie about her pain or anything like that, but that's how I felt. Yeah. And just like, I felt as though I had more examinations than lots of other people. So in the night, I felt like they'd come and wake me up, and I'd feel like a bit like, oh, why it me again? And sometimes it's just things like that you sort of thought, I just never felt calm or comfortable being in the hospital on my own, really. I'm scared of, is this normal? But it just got to the point where you were a little bit scared. You had to just trust everything they were telling you. I mean, there was one amazing midwife that I will always praise and thank, because she actually said to me when I was in labor, well, they were going to break my waters at one point, and it was actually a consultant that came in and wanted to break my waters, and I'd been induced, I'd had all this treatment, and I wasn't getting anywhere, I wasn't dilating, and this consultant kept saying, no, we're going to break your waters, we're going to break your waters. And this midwife said, you're a nurse, you know that you can, you know about consent, do not consent to this, else the baby's not going to make it, or you're not going to make it. You can say no, and that's when I ended up having a section, but that was the following day. But she is the only midwife that actually supported me and like let me know I had a choice, and I'm so grateful for that, because I don't think, you know, I just think it would have been a lot worse if that hadn't happened. So what judgments you might have or stereotypes you might have in your head about things or things you've heard, that person is an individual and they deserve individual care. Please don't think, you know, even people with different religions, don't think, oh, well, I've treated something like that before, they didn't like this or they didn't like that. You need to ask them. And, you know, they need to be involved with their care as well. And I just think sometimes just being really human and asking somebody what the concerns are or what they're worried about, because it's something new to a lot of people. And every birth's different. So even if I'd had 6 or 7 children, they didn't know that before. And everybody that came along to me. So I just think it's really important that it's individual care for everybody.
Gosh, that was brilliant. Thank you to Gemma Newbold for actually sharing her experiences with us, because it's not what you want to hear. I mean, I had 3 pregnancies myself, and at the time, thankfully, 3 sons. I didn't know any of the things that I know now. And I think if I knew what I know now, I'd have been absolutely terrified, because knowing that I would be 5 times more likely to lose my life going through my pregnancies would have completely freaked me out. But I guess that's probably why we're here today, to talk about some of this and to talk about how we can make things better for all women, not just for some women. We're very lucky to have Dr. Joseph Omofumo with us today. Dr. Joseph is a GP in Rochdale with special interest in mental health and reproductive health. He's passionate about educating the community and is involved in training of medical students at Manchester University, and he's also a pastor of the church. I'm loving that picture that you've got up there of me. I certainly don't look like that this morning. Maybe that's why my camera's decided not to work today. But thank you. So on that note, Dr. Joseph, over to you.
Thank you, Yvonne. Good morning to everyone, and I hope everyone can hear me okay. We've had some amazing speakers already this morning. We had talk from the Vice Lieutenant, from the amazing Faye Bruce. Congratulations once again. We've heard from Diane. I thought that was powerful. You know, I'm a motivational speaker myself, so I really recognize and identify with a lot of things she said. And also from our own Dr. Diosage. This morning, obviously, we're celebrating women, and I grew up with a very powerful mom. She's still alive. She's 78 this year, not showing any signs of slowing down at all. She had 7 children of her own, plus several other adopted children. I grew up with 5 sisters, and I have 2 daughters. So I'm very much in tune with things that happen in the family. I'm still learning about understanding women, by the way. I've got, I've ordered books on Amazon and things. I've got audio books. I'm trying to still discover what it means to understand how women think. And, I'm getting there slowly, very, very slowly. I hope at the end of this, I'll be able to share some personal experience as well. Today, I just wanted to, I've been asked to talk to you about chronic stress and how chronic stress of racism and how it impacts upon women. And I only have a very short bit of time, so I'll try and keep it conversational and relevant to what we're going to be dealing with today. I mean, there's a lot to talk about on this issue. There have been brilliant papers that have been written, so I'll try and keep it nice and short. So by and large, there is a perception of the woman or the girl child, which has always been negative. Like our Vice Lieutenant mentioned, over the years, it's always been a disadvantage point where the woman is, particularly where I'm from in the African community, and I'm sure it's the same in the Caribbean, Afro-Caribbean community, where a woman is seen as a second-class citizen. As a matter of fact, in some parts of Nigeria where I'm from, you're no better than property. And so the fate of the girl child is being almost determined from an early age, where the girl is less likely to be educated, less likely to have certain privileges, less likely to be favored. And so all of that starts. But more importantly, now in this current world that we live in, there is that thing that happens when you add on top of all that, the fact that it's not just that I'm a girl and then you're adding racism or bias to it, and it really, really compounds. So stress is a physical, mental, or emotional factor that causes bodily, mental tension or pressure. The effects of racism is still a point of ongoing research, but it's a widely validated point and as a major contributory factor to stress. There's a paper that I looked into where it says findings from the research conducted by the Office of Women's Health in 2018 and even and the American Psychological Association indicated that race, gender, and class significantly affected stress-related incidents and coping and health outcomes. So it's all there in the research for us to see. And, you know, if you want to look at what chronic or what racism really connotes to many of us, we know it's a bias that is based on you know, person's belief. Let's say this properly. So I love this definition. Racism defined as the belief that a race is the primary determinant of human traits and capabilities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race. So it's the belief that because you're in a certain way, you know, because you look in a certain way, then, you know, you are going to be either of a certain amount of intelligence or otherwise. Let's look at some outcomes or some physical and mental effects of stress, as it were. Let's try and share this screen. So by and large, these are things that we already know about, and many of us have probably experienced it. So I don't think I'm saying a lot of new things this morning. I just wanted to bring this to bear just in case there were still a few of us who weren't aware, and I'll try and highlight a few things. But in terms of physical health, we're looking at high blood pressure, coronary heart disease, reduced immunity. There's a lovely paper that's been written about this, showing that this may be the reason why a lot of Black and ethnic minority are actually being more susceptible to COVID, because the effects of chronic racism affects us in such a way that inflammatory markers are heightened. That somehow reduces the immunity and the immune response, which then makes one susceptible to COVID. Well, it's still an ongoing research, but we know that it does reduce immunity. Poor sleep is a major factor. Nearly every paper that I looked at represented this as a major issue. Disturbed sleep, disturbed psychological, you know, well-being. Obesity. One of my colleagues is going to be talking about maternal mortality this morning, so I'm not going to say very much about that. I do have a private experience to share. Bias in treatment received, like the lady who was just talking about her pregnancy experience shared just now, you know, believing that, you know, Afro-Caribbean or Black ethnic minority are more likely to shout out, you know, try and say, you know, the lower pain threshold or whatever it is. But yeah, that is still there. In terms of mental health, you're looking at anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, bipolar, body dysmorphic disorders, poor self-image, increased risks of suicide, and a lack of aspiration. Now, aspiration is a big one for me because I believe that everyone should attain their potential. Like in the introduction, I'm not just a GP, I'm a pastor of a local church. I'm also a motivational speaker. And one of the things that really irks me is when, especially women, are not given the room or the space to really achieve their highest potential, because there's nothing that says a woman can't be everything that men can be. There's no such thing. I grew up in a very peculiar household where I mentioned having 5 sisters. So out of my 5 sisters, 2 of them are lawyers, one of them is a doctor, well, 3 of them are lawyers, one of them is a doctor, the other one's a teacher. So it just tells you the kind of mentality my dad had. So we didn't really see our sisters as being any different to us. They were just treated equally and the same. As a matter of fact, I used to tease my dad that he probably gave them special treatment, but that's another chat entirely. Let's look at a few case studies to highlight this in terms of inequalities that women experience. This is in my role as a pastor. This lady attends our church, a 59-year-old lady who she did suffer with obesity and hypertension, and she suffered a stroke. It was amazing how her employers were insisting on cutting her pay and reducing her other benefits. I just couldn't believe it. You know, I mean, I know people when they have strokes, they're away for 6 months, a year, and things like that, and nothing happens. As a matter of fact, you know, they're giving all the support that they need. Why were they insisting that, you know, they would cut her pay? She went to the Royal College of Nursing and they said, well, you know, it hadn't quite escalated up to that point yet. And she was really getting stressed about it because obviously she has ongoing financial commitments. So I got involved in my role as a pastor, I think, you know, and decided to attend a few of the virtual meetings. And, you know, I quietly would introduce myself that actually, you know, I'm a GP as well. And sometimes that made them sit up a little bit. And, you know, fortunately, we were able to get some justice for her and, you know, get her to where she needed to be. But it's amazing. It was just very, very interesting to me because, you know, I couldn't fathom why things were going that way. Another example that I wanted to share with us today is a young lady that came into my consulting room, British-born Afro-Caribbean lady. She was severely anxious. She just couldn't get her head around the fact that anybody would appreciate her for anything. This has affected her all through. She was delayed in her schooling. She was underperforming. And when we got to the nitty-gritty of it, she just felt that she never could really fit in because she didn't look like her friends. She thought her nose was too big. And many of you African women will identify with that. She thought that this was too small, that was too big. You know, she just felt she was never good enough, despite the fact that she came from a very loving home, parents. I met the dad, spoke. But there was just that body dysmorphia. There was just that lack of acceptance of herself, which I know can happen to anybody. But this was particularly because of her race. Now, because her parents were well-to-do, they had sent her to good schools, and you know, she'd mingled with, you know, good people, but she just felt different, and it really, really affected her and continued to affect her. Third case study, which very sad story, was a lady who had lost. Well, her friend got killed as a teenager. I think it was shot or stabbed. This happened in Moss Side, by the way, just right around in Manchester, right here. And so she and one of her own sons eventually went to prison. There's a happy ending to this because the young man turned his life around and, you know, got a job with a good bank and is doing really, really well. But the woman, when I met her, she was suffering with PTSD, chronic anxiety. She just struggled to find happy days, couldn't motivate herself to be educated or to learn. She was fearful of going out. She was suspicious of authority because of the way her son's case was handled. You know, there is this thing where it's people are indicted by association. And so, you know, you see a group of young men, especially if they're Black, and already you're a target. She's improved, and, you know, with professional counseling, etc. And we also had to counsel her from a Christian perspective. You see, it's important to point out that, you know, if you're not Black, you won't really understand certain things that I'm saying here today, because I had a conversation with my good friend who is, he's a tutor with the Royal College, and we were talking about the fact that medical students are not being taught as we speak about how to read skin conditions in Afro-Caribbean people. So my friend is on a campaign to make sure that's introduced into the medical curriculum, so that, because when I worked, for example, in Hapohe, they would refer all the Afro-Caribbean people to me who had skin conditions because the doctors there just had no clue. And we found out that, I later on found out it's actually not in the curriculum for them to learn that. You know, that is bias on its own. But when I was speaking to my friend, he couldn't believe how many times I had been stopped by the police for no reason. Absolutely no reason. Someone decides to stop me, someone, you know, I have all my insurance. As a matter of fact, the last one that happened, the guy was asking me about insurance. And I said, look, I don't even know how much I pay for insurance. I just pay for it every year. You know, it just goes. I still got given a ticket. Yeah, and which I contested in court. But I didn't need, that didn't need to happen to me. So this is why I'm saying that in terms of the cultural things that happen, sometimes people don't really understand. Speaking about maternity care and things like that, this is an experience that happened to me because Faye wanted me to share a few things personal. I'll go there. As a husband and as a father, my second child, who's turning 10 in about 22 days. My wife had 3 cesarean sections, so this was going to be her second pregnancy. Cut a long story short, we'd gone in and out of hospital. Was she dilated? She wasn't. Was she there? Because the consultant had said, look, as soon as you go into labor, we need to see you. You may end up having another CS because you've had 1 cesarean section before. We went there and my wife woke me up in the morning. My wife is not a slouch. She's not a complainant. She woke up and said, look, I'm in a lot of pain. And so yes, that lovely book, Mind the Gap, that's a good book to look at, talking about this thing I talked about, dermatology not being in the curriculum. So we went to the hospital and, we were pretty much ignored, There's another Black woman in pain, or why is she in so much pain? So they connected everything. Long story short, I was there in the room with her. They didn't know I was a doctor. I just sort of stayed. Whenever I go into hospital, I just I don't tell people I'm a doctor or anything. I don't like causing trouble. But as I looked at the CTG, the baby tracing, I discovered that my wife, she's in a lot more pain than she usually would be. I mean, I've delivered loads of babies, for my sins. I've delivered loads of babies myself, So I called the lady midwife and I said, look, this is not normal, I'm not sure what's going on here, and I don't think that thing's right. Oh, she goes, oh, this is da. I said, look, I'm a GP. Go call your registrar. At this point in time, I wasn't interested in, the registrar comes in and she gets a little bit stroppy with me, but she takes one look at the CTG and she immediately, in my presence, rings the consultant. What's happened? My wife's uterus had ruptured and nobody knew about it. I mean, that was why she was in a lot of pain. Now, for those of you who may not be medical, a uterine rupture is almost a death sentence for a mother and baby if it's allowed to continue, because the uterine vessels, the blood vessels are so huge that if a woman starts bleeding from there, they pretty much die. As a matter of fact, 3 or 4 weeks after we gave birth to my child, there was an Asian lady in London, 25-year-old girl, who had exactly the same thing my wife had. The lady died, the baby died. That would have been the outcome for us if we hadn't. The consultant obstetrician who came said if we had delayed another 1 hour, we would have lost the baby, etc. But my child came out. She had to be in the baby unit. As a matter of fact, I think it was Ngozi's husband that delivered my first baby, but I'll catch up with her about that later on. But there we go. In terms of if I hadn't been a medic, God knows what the outcome would have been. So these things are there, and it's not just, for sure. Let me quickly round up my little spiel on this. How do we cope with these inequalities that we know are present? I think there should be more discussions about this. I think there should be more forums and fora where we can really, really express ourselves. Studies have shown that talking about racist experiences, instead of bottling them up, can help a person process their feelings of anger, frustration, and stress better. Let's talk about it. Let's bring it out. It also serves as an education point for my colleagues who are of a different skin color, because they don't know. Like my friend Steve, he just couldn't fathom why they would stop a doctor driving just because I'm driving my car wasn't that great then anyway, But why would they would stop me? But there's a bit of an unconscious bias. I mean, I've gone to work in some hospitals and they thought I was the delivery guy, and I would just laugh. And the nurse was like, why are you laughing about this? I said, well, I've grown thick skin. I've kind of gotten used to being thought about in a certain way. But does that mean we should accept it? I don't think so. So these things are there. So the other thing as well is also identity. How to cope with this is embracing and having a strong racial identity. We need to teach our children, teach ourselves to embrace and accept who we are. I mean, look at Dorita this morning, looking wonderful, doing her wonderful neck exercises and things like that. I wish all I needed to do was those neck exercises just to look like Dorita, but I suspect I may have to do a little bit more than neck exercises. Also, community, having a strong social support, family, friends is important. as this empirically shows, it reduces the effects on mental health. Also, if you're spiritual, utilize your belief system, you know, because most of the time, all the spiritual houses, the mosques, the churches, this usually involves meeting other people, and that is very beneficial to our mental health. It's also important, if things are getting on top of us, to make sure that we get professional help, counseling, and to speak to a healthcare professional. So I'm going to leave it there, and I hope that this has been beneficial to you. Thank you for having me, and have a wonderful International Women's Day. Thank you.
Oh, that was absolutely fantastic, Dr. Joseph. That was really, really, really interesting. And I am so, so sorry that your wife went through that, but thank God she is well, and your son is well, with your daughter as well, your daughter as well. So, you know, that's brilliant. But what an experience. And the things you were saying about your experience as a Black man is, you know, it's so common in our society. And even though you say you're thin is thick, these things permeate, and they are things that we know cause people a lot of stress and strain. And hopefully we are going to be moving into a time in society when these things are a thing of the past, because it's inconceivable that people get a different experience of life based on the amount of melanin in their skin. And that melanin being there specifically for a reason, which is to protect us from the sun or not, you know, and it's just inconceivable. Anyway, we move on because I know that we are late. So thank you so much for that. Really, really appreciate it. We have two women's stories now, Anita Matimba and Shola Akintade, who are going to tell us a little bit about their experiences. Anita's going to tell us about giving birth to a baby that was 1 kilo. I mean, a bag of sugar. I mean, tiny, tiny, tiny baby. And Shola's going to talk about her history of hypertension and in her family, which led to a really, really difficult time for her and her family. And she's going to say a little bit about that. So on that note, let's listen to these lovely ladies.
So when I found out that I was pregnant, I was shocked initially because I was not expecting to be pregnant. And then joy after. So I went for the initial booking, and then everything was sort of okay. And then I was just expecting, like, you know, any mum just to sort of get the support of, I mean, the sort of care, you know, during pregnancy and stuff. And then, yeah, things didn't quite go as I was expecting. And for example, I didn't expect, or I didn't know that I could have a baby so early, because at the booking it was, oh, when you're 40 weeks pregnant, or when you're, you know, when you reach full term and stuff like that. So, and I was panicking, and I woke my mom up and I said, oh, Mom, I'm bleeding. I think something's wrong. String me, they said, we can't discharge you because there's a chance that the baby might be coming, because we're not really happy with the baby's heart rate and stuff. So we need to monitor you initially, is what they said, gonna happen. And so the consultant, when she checked me again, she just pressed the emergency button and said, you know, and called the other consultants to come into the room. So they said, oh, she needs to have an emergency C-section. And then the other consultant was like, no, we've not got time. She just has to push now, because there's a risk of, if we delay it any further, preparing her for a C-section. And then, yeah, they just said, you know, you need to start pushing because baby's head is almost out. And then, yeah, the next thing, I don't even know what happened. I just saw the baby on the bed and baby crying. And the baby was so, so, so small. And I was thinking to myself, wow, I was so, so scared. that were they going to survive, and like I had like all sorts and of emotions, and so they quickly stitched me up and that, and then they said that they would contact me once baby's ready. So I had him, I think around 12 o'clock midnight on the Thursday. I didn't get to see him on Friday at 7 in the evening because they were, doing all sorts, working on him and stuff. So by the time I went there, I was so sick because I didn't realize that when I was complaining of these cramps, because I said to the midwife, I think something snapped inside me. I didn't realize at the time that it was my placenta that had actually ruptured. So I had placental abruption when I was in hospital, and it was the worst thing ever. I think I was so stressed out because I had like these group of youths that were just hanging around my my flat, and they would come and like start smoking and doing drugs. The police, they asked me to like take pictures and videos and send it to housing. So I'd be passed on from housing, and then housing would be saying, no, that's not our responsibility. For quite a long time, they stole my card that I had, and then the police recovered it after a few months, and they bent communication between the staff. I'll give an example of when I had the placental abruption, and then so there was talks of me going into theatre for, I think, vacuum it's called. I'm not too sure with these medical terms, but anyway, to remove basically, what was left of the placenta. And then they said that, okay, she's going to go into theatre, and, that was it. So they said, so one of the nurses came in and said, oh, you're nil by mouth now till tomorrow. You can't eat anything, you can't drink anything. We'll let you know when we'll come to get you, to take you to the theatre. So anyway, I waited till 5 o'clock. So I hadn't eaten from 12 in the afternoon that day. And then I waited till 5 o'clock the next day. Nobody told me anything, that they decided to cancel the operation. And I was just, and because I was so emotional, going through all sorts, thinking about, is my baby going to survive? And they didn't tell me anything. They didn't like sort of keep me informed of what was going on. And I just felt like I'm just on my own, because nobody would come and say, okay, this is what's going to happen now. Or they'll just ring me downstairs and say, oh, we need milk for baby. And that's it. So I would have to, and I'm in so much pain, and then I had no energy at all. I had to pump this milk for baby and express milk for baby. And so I just think that they need to better communicate when it comes to, like, I think for the first month or so, if that, and then they said, at the moment we can't come out because of COVID, and we're just giving priority to those people that actually need, and I said, but it's just me, and I've got this 1 kilo baby, and mind you, he was so tiny even after we got discharged. And I did raise my concerns at the hospital. I said, I don't feel confident taking such a tiny baby at home. So for them, it's when he hits a certain visitor until I don't even remember. But I sent her a text at one point, and I said, I've not even heard from you. I don't even know what's going on. Am I doing the right thing? Raising baby, feeding him, and his weight, I didn't even know, if he was growing. And so anyway, they came and weighed him, and things sort of improved, but I think they could have still done a lot better, because that I got in there, I had like people that were next door to me, and you could see that the treatment is different. You just left there, but you have like nurses coming in and out of the other room. I've got one nurse that said to me, you need to file a complaint. She said, please don't bring my name into it, and but you need to file a complaint. So this is when the head of midwifery, I think, that's when she now came in. But if it wasn't for that, she wouldn't have come in. So that, to me, that says a lot.
Starting a family is a really exciting time. So when you find out you're pregnant, it's, you know, you're excited, you're looking forward to the future and, you know, what lies ahead. Just excited to be pregnant and to be, you know, starting that journey of growing a family. As the pregnancy went on, I think it's quite normal to feel a bit anxious, and I think, you know, you do have those thoughts and concerns. I think particularly as a doctor, you're aware of the potential risks associated with pregnancy, and I think that was something that was highlighted for me because of my family history, that I was a bit more maybe on edge during the pregnancy. My mother had a brain hemorrhage 2 weeks after giving birth to my younger sister. So she had very raised blood pressure that came quite out of the blue. And the consequences of that were really quite tragic, and she was left disabled as a result. So alongside the excitement of being pregnant, yes, as time went on, you know, you do have those sort of niggly concerns to sort of battle with as well. The first pregnancy, well, in fact, both of them relatively uneventful during the pregnancy. The team was aware that, you know, of my family history. So I think there was a little bit more caution at times. But relatively, the pregnancy was relatively uneventful. Interestingly, at the same time, my sister was also pregnant, and she also had a relatively uneventful pregnancy. It was more sort of the delivery where there were a few issues that came up. My son, it was due to be just a natural delivery, but unfortunately I failed to progress during the labour, so needed to have an emergency C-section, which was very unexpected. It hadn't, to be honest, it really hadn't even crossed my mind that was even a thing that could happen. You know, my mum had 4 children, she'd had normal deliveries. My sister at that point had 6 months earlier had a normal delivery, and I just thought it would be the same thing. But unfortunately, in that instance, it became clear that it was going to be necessary to have an emergency C-section, which I did. And then I think sort of day 2 post-op, I sort of collapsed, and unfortunately my blood pressure shot up at that point, and I just had to have a lot of investigations, and I was admitted into the intensive care in the maternity unit, where I stayed for several days while I was investigated, and eventually my blood pressure was brought under control with medication. I was discharged home, but obviously in that initial period, the first couple of weeks, you have a lot of input from the midwife comes and visits, and they were just sort of monitoring my blood pressure, and it did actually end up going high again. I ended up being readmitted into hospital, so it was quite a rocky time, really. But yeah, so that was the situation for me. The anxiety level was a bit higher with the just memory of all the uncertainties and unexpected events of my first pregnancy. But it actually went, I try and be aware of health and my lifestyle. So generally I'm someone that, you know, I like to go out running. I go out running regularly. I try and monitor my diet and things. So I think those things really continued. I just tried to be more aware really during my pregnancy, and keep up some of those sort of lifestyle factors, and just also being aware of those sort of anxious thoughts, and just trying not to be too stressed out about that sort of thing going through the pregnancy. The maternity team responded in each case, whether it was the first case where I needed to have an emergency C-section and then keeping me in, and you know, I think they responded well to the circumstances. But yeah, with all NHS services and maternity services included, I think as health professionals, it's really important to treat our patients as almost like family, to have that care and attention to detail, making sure that things aren't missed, and being very responsive and empathetic. I know that anxiety of, you know, having my blood pressure raised and having all those concerns and going through all these investigations, it really made it real to me, the patient experience. And, you know, not only have I been a patient, but I've also been a relative, you know, with my mother, or even all those years ago, becoming so unwell. You know, I think we should never lose touch with the fact that our patients are real people with, you know, lives, and just keep that that reality really at the forefront of our minds as we treat patients in maternity care, but in all NHS services.
So Wendy's a very, very good friend of mine. I've known her for a long time. She's just recently taken up a fantastic post with our Chief Midwifery Officer, Jackie Dunkley-Bent, and she is the new maternity lead at NHSI and HSE for equality, and specifically looking at Black and ethnic minority women and their experiences of he's going to talk to us now about what the NHS system is doing to reduce the outcomes in maternal health for women of colour. So Wendy, over to you. Great to see you.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. Such an honour to be on the same platform with you.
Oh.
By the way, I do refer to Yvonne as Mama Diversity. Yes. So she's really paved the way for us and fighting all this. And thank you for all you've been doing, what you've done.
Thank you.
I'm so grateful to have you.
Right. Love you. Thank you.
A very good morning to everyone. I'm just trying to go and share my screen, and while I'm trying to do that, hopefully it works. Right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay. Charles and Faith, thank you very much for inviting us today, and happy International Women's Day to everyone. It's such an honor to be here. And by the way, I'm representing Professor Jacqueline Dunkley-Bent. I'm OBE, the Chief Midwifery Officer today. She's obviously unable to join in today, and I'm standing in for her. So thank you for having us. I'm just going to put this on the sliding show. Maybe hopefully it will be much bigger to see. Right. So yes, my name is Wendy Olaiwola. I must say I'm just 2 weeks old in this role as the National Maternity Lead for Equality. And it's such an honor to be and hear everything that previous speakers have said, especially the powerful experience of Gemma. It's wonderful. It's really powerful. It's good to hear what the service users are saying to us, and obviously what the last speaker said as well, from the men's perspective. Again, I think we've all had our experiences within the maternity, and so do I. I have 2 children myself, and I must say to you that my experience is not different from what the doctor I've just experienced. I had my experience as well. A very senior midwife, my husband is an obstetrician, and we had it. So it doesn't matter who you are, how well educated you are in the system, and that's what we actually here to talk about and to change. So just to give you an overview of what we are doing to ensure that we change the narratives. I'm going to talk about equity, equality, and obviously the all the deliveries and the interventions that we are doing at national levels, including metrics, the outcomes, the visions and the aims, to ensure that we get everything, on the right path. So what are our drivers for this issue? So it's for us to provide high quality care. And what does that mean? It's about safety, it's about effectiveness, it's about good users experience, and it's about efficiency, it's about timely, and most importantly, it's about, to be equitable in all the care that we provide. So to achieve this, we do have legal duties, and what actually governs our legal duties is around NHS Constitution. For those that do not know what it is, in terms of NHS Constitution, is about everybody having access, equal access to treatment, being respectful regardless of who you are, what race you have, what background you have, and then also Equalities Act 2010, as well as Health and Social Care Act 2012. Right, what is the vision? The maternity's vision, what is it? It's about providing, self-care. It's about safety. It's about individualized. I think Gemma mentioned it would have been nice to individualize that care. Yes, very much so. It's about providing individualized care. It's about personalized care. So what is equality and equity? How does it sit with us? Because when we're talking about equality, is it same service level for all? Because not forgetting that a lot of people are already disadvantaged. They are already deprived of many things. Would equality be the same for them? No. So if you look at this picture, I think it says it all. For those that have not seen it before, and apologies if you have seen it before, equality is about safe service for all, which obviously does not really apply to everyone. So equity. So basically equity is about making sure that everyone have the same clinical outcomes for all. So it does not matter who you are, where you live, in the country, your clinical outcomes must be a safe one for everyone. So our approach to achieve equity is very much around Michael Marmot's Fair Society, Healthy Lives. So it is very important for us to look at the scale, the proportionate universalism around actions. So it is very much for us. I think this report, what it has taught us and what we're working around it is about intensifying providing the intensity on the scale, i.e. the issue of BAME women not having the same services or not having the same treatment as the non-BAME women. So it's about intensifying that scale of treatment, of listening, of actions. And it's very important in terms of leadership. For those of you that possibly know Professor Dunkley Bent, this is very close to our hearts. She is actually personally leading on this. So leadership is the key, when it comes to making a change in any system. So she's leading the team, and it's also a multidisciplinary team approach. So we do have Michelle Moore, who is the National Specialty Advisor for Obstetrics for NHS England, as well as consultant obstetrician. Misha is very much passionate about public health because, again, this is a public health issue. So I've just joined the team, like I said, 2 weeks into the role, and it's so amazing as to what have been done and what we are going to do moving forward in terms of changing the narratives. It's very important for us to talk about when it comes to why Black or Asian women are dying. What are the causes? What are the risks, protective, factors? Very much intersectional. If you look at in terms of Pakistani or the Asians, if I'm just use the words covering Pakistani and the Bangladeshi, the community is very much, congenital abnormalities for them. And there is a reason for that. Hence, we are actually taking all that into consideration. What are the things that we can do to minimize all that? But for Black people, for someone from African Caribbean background, it's very much around immaturity related conditions. And what does that mean? And I think Gemma actually alluded to that in her testimony. It's around, blood pressure, all those comorbidities for conditions that comes with being a Black woman, the blood pressure.
So when I found out that I was pregnant, I was shocked initially.
Absolutely. And these are the things that obviously many of us do not know. So we will it's about actual education even within our community as to what are the things that I'm actually, the risk that I have when I get pregnant. The blood pressure, which is preeclampsia, because when you have the risk, when you get pregnant, the risks are even more higher. So, and when it comes to smoking, and if you look at the statistics at Booking, 16% of whites smokes, 2% from Asian background, and 4%, not as much high, but during pregnancy, and is times 12 in most deprived. And who are the people that lives in those most deprived area? They are Black and Asian, women. And so that obviously increased their risk in pregnancy. And when it comes to obesity, again, Gemma, you alluded to that as well. If you look at it, 33% in terms of the BMI, 33% already even in pregnancy. And when you then now live in a most deprived area, you are at 28%, more at risk. And that goes down to even breastfeeding. And coming down to continuity of care in terms of one of the intervention to ensure that this is minimized and things are well reduced and people get more safer when they get pregnant, especially women from BAME background. So women at 16% less likely to lose their baby. And I will be talking more about continuity of care later. Hopefully time permits me. Please do let me know if I'm really running, coming to my time, because I'm not keeping an eye on it here. Okay, let's see. Right. So this is about how equitable are the outcomes. And this slide just showed the rate of Black women in terms of maternal mortality rate. Even though in 2017 it was 13%, then subsequently it just got stalled basically, but the rate continued to be higher for. Just gonna make a move here. Sorry, this is right in my face. I think it's better. So the rate is much more higher for Black women, mixed race ethnicity, and this is very much the most recent Embrace report we have. As you can see, it's now for Black women, it's now ×4. But prior to the Embrace UK report for 2020, it was 5 times. That obviously woke all of us up in terms of, gosh, this is very alarming for Black women, even though it has reduced a little bit, but obviously that is not where we want to be. So there's still, we already embarked on the journey, on the intervention journey, but then there's still a lot of things for us to do. In terms of the stillbirth rate for Black women and Asian women, it has been high for so many years and continue to be high, but recently it has dropped again, and that is due to a lot of work that is being done in the system, including with the voluntary organizations. So in terms of the CQC experience and survey that they actually recently reported, the white women are more likely than BAME women to agree that their concerns were taken seriously during labor. And the other way around is BAME women actually confirmed that their issues are being listened to during antenatal and postnatal care. So again, it's about where are we not getting it right for our BAME women. So these are some of the interventions already on the way. They are not just on the way, but they are actually, we are already implementing them, i.e. the continuity of carer. For the women, on this platform, it would be nice to hear if you've heard about continuity of carer. Gemma, did you experience a named midwife from the start of your pregnancy? Because that is the aim of continuity of carer, which is, transformation, maternity transformational program of Better Birth, that came in 5 years ago. It's coming actually to the 5th year. Hence, we expect all women to know that when they're pregnant, they should have a named midwife or a group of midwives, not more than 8 midwives, going through the journey with them. Unlike before that, a lot of women just see so many midwives, they don't even know who is who, they don't know who, they'll probably see about 10 to 15 midwives throughout the journey. So they really do not have a face, of a midwife that goes through the journey. So at the moment, what everybody, every woman, regardless of your risk factors, regardless of your race, or regardless of where you are in the country, you should have a named midwife as well as a named doctor. So when you go into the services, these are the things that you need to be asking. Who is my named midwife? Who is coming? Who is the team midwifery that is coming on this journey with me? And there is a target set on this. So by 2025, we expected 75% of women from Black and Asian backgrounds to be on the pathway. So when you're when you're pregnant and you go in for booking, they need to put you on that pathway, and you need to be meeting your named midwife as well as your team midwives. So also in terms of smoking, there's a lot of money being a lot of services being funded to actually support women that are actually smoking during pregnancy. So just because of that, I'm just going to walk through this quickly. And also working closely with maternity voice partnerships, a group that actually supports and gives women voice in the system. So focus on, I think I've already mentioned what continuity of care is all about, and what the impact and the outcome that we are expecting. Because what that does is it reduces the fear and input confidence in the system for those Black women or Asian women in the system. It also improves the advocacy of what a midwife is supposed to do for women. So you have somebody, raising your voice, raising your concerns on your behalf. So in terms of pandemic, and this slide just talked about a lot of studies that were done during pandemic on pregnant women, and what this has done, it has not actually given us any new evidence, but what it has done is just highlighted and iterated what IE Embrace has actually told us in the research. The UCOS study research did say that for 55% of pregnant women admitted during COVID, where majority of them were from BIM populations, and that is not news to us. We do know that we have more risk, and as you know, during this pandemic, we are actually disproportionately affected during COVID. And again, COVID has just highlighted the issues in the system. It just highlighted our disadvantaged, and also it has highlighted the reason why we really have to be where we are now, to start saying, no, enough is enough. Let's start changing the narratives. Let's start doing something together. So out of 8 women that died during pandemic, 7 of them were from BIM background. So hence it got people like Professor Jacqueline Dunkley-Banks and RCOG to come together and put an action in place. And there are a lot of priorities that were put in place, and some of them were very much around working with the local maternity services, asking them to put a standing operating procedure together. Comes to kids for those that are on internet, that comes to kids is actually out for people to see how they communicate, amongst and within the BM community, especially within pregnant women. And also good practice being shared. And it's very, very importantly for women that are pregnant, there are a lot of COVID leaflet information on nhs.uk that you can actually download in about 11 languages. So you're not alone. There are a lot of information out there to actually support you. And if you're having any issues, just please do access whatever information and services that are available within your local maternity. There are a lot of information and services being adapted and being changed for our BIM women. So this slide is just to tell you about there are metrics, and this helps us to gauge and also monitor the impact that all the interventions that are being put in place are actually achieving. So I'm not going to go through this just because of time. And just also to note that the good news is we now have a perinatal equity strategy being written that is coming out very soon, and it looks at an evidence-based and proportionate universalism that I spoke about in terms of equity and equality, the outcomes, and then the factors that influence mortality and morbidity, and all the national initiatives are being put under this equity strategy. And as soon as that is come out, hopefully it should come out soon, and this will be shared amongst all the services. I think that is me, Yvonne.
Oh, thank you, Wendy. Thank you so much for all of that. Do you know what? I'm sitting here listening to all of this data, and it is actually quite scary, actually. Some of the things that 7 out of 8 women that died of COVID happened to come from non-white backgrounds. You know, the numbers of people from non-white backgrounds that lose their lives, lose their babies. And you have to ask yourself the question, because we are all bound by the NHS Constitution, which talks about fair and equitable care for all. You have to ask yourself the question, what is going on here? And this is something that I should imagine is bigger and broader and wider than just the NHS, which we know. And you have to ask, well, what do we do about this? Because I would hazard a guess that every single person on this call and most people across the world would say, we want equitable care for everybody, regardless of background. So something is going on in our system that's not really helping. And I think Gemma outlined that when she was talking on her video. I think we now have the videos. Can I just say, Wendy, thank you so much for that. That was brilliant. I know that you're going to do a wonderful job working with Professor Jackie Dunkley-Bent. I look forward to working with you in future, and thank you so much for that. Much, much appreciated. So we've got Dr. Vanessa Appiah, a consultant physician and in sexual health and HIV medicine. And Vanessa's going to talk to us about her work, and I'm so grateful to you for being here, Vanessa. Thank you, and I'll hand over to you now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I have to say, I can't think of a better way to celebrate International Women's Day than being here. And I've been so touched by all the reflections, and directors really helped me with my posture and breathing. So I'm really grateful for that. So I'm going to, and I also have to say, I want to acknowledge some of the women on this call, because Wendy we had Wendy at Barts with us, and she left to this wonderful role, but we're very proud of Wendy at Barts and miss her dearly, but we know she's going to do great things. And Yvonne, my mum is one of your biggest fans, as we met you previously at the Windrush Awards. So she always talks about you. So just to acknowledge. So I'm just going to share my slides, and hopefully this will work. Didn't work perfectly, but we can go to the beginning. Great, okay. So just everyone, again, thank you to CAHN for inviting me to speak. And some people always wonder, being a consultant in sexual health and HIV, why in my role that I feel that this is so powerful and to be a part of. And I think it's both on a personal level and experiences I've had in the maternity setting, which I'll mention later. But also, I think it's also recognizing how other people within the health system outside of maternal care are key to supporting women. So I've just entitled this that Black maternal care requires a lifetime of care. And I'm going to be focusing on the preconception. So when we look at a woman and we look at our life and our life course, I think often the way that I look at it is that it is a lifetime of opportunities. So in terms of life and intervention, but also it's a lifetime of exposure that we have to different challenges and influences, and that accumulates risk in what we experience. And when we look at preconception, and I think I've just highlighted it, thinking of first birth, so before someone's first pregnancy, and if successful, first birth, and also subsequent births, it's that opportunity to promote preconception health and reduce the risk over the early and reproductive years of our journey. And the concept of preconception health is that many of the health behaviours and risk factors for poor birth outcomes are established prior to pregnancy, and there's often limited opportunity to impact it when you find out you're pregnant. So that preconception part is really crucial in supporting women to have more positive outcomes. And when we think of the health of women during their reproductive years, there's two different ways to think about it in terms of how do we support women to plan their pregnancy, so enables them to think about and choose if and when they want to start or grow their families, and also supporting women so that they're fit for pregnancy.
When I found out that I was pregnant, I was shocked.
And recognise the health behaviours and risk factors that can be amenable to change.
And why does it matter? Because poor preconception health really limits women's choices and impacts on the safety and outcomes for mothers and babies. So what should happen? What would happen in an ideal world? So in an ideal world, you have the space and given the opportunity to reflect and plan for your pregnancy. And then also, after planning for your pregnancy, really supported to be fit for your pregnancy. So having so-called healthy behaviors, a healthy diet, folic acid supplements, regular physical activity, supporting your emotional well-being, etc. Then looking at risk factors such as smoking, alcohol, obesity, substance misuse, thinking about things that have happened previously, genetic risks, but also previous pregnancy complications that need to be addressed as well. And then thinking about all those wider determinants of health, which are housing, education, and how you're supported to give you the best chance of the best outcome. And when we think about that, why is that important again? So if you look at obesity, and I'm happy to share my slides after, because sometimes some of these things, just trying to absorb it. But if we look at obesity, so it's really clear in studies that maternal lifestyle really underpins this kind of intergenerational cycle of obesity. And so if someone is obese at pregnancy, before pregnant, and then whilst pregnant, that increases the likelihood of the child having difficulties with metabolic disorders and managing sugar, etc., and leading to things like obesity. And so the key thing is that if we've got an opportunity pre-conception that we can support mothers to improve their dietary intake and other factors, which again, it's not about fault blaming, and it's not about blaming, and it's not about drawing fault. It's about supporting women to make better choices and guide women to even let them know that this is an issue, so that then we can break the chain of generational obesity. But then what about the Black experience? And I think here lies and why today's been really beautiful, because it is that opportunity that we share the differences. We've heard the facts, but I think there's nothing more powerful than when you hear from a woman. And again, we're all using Gemma's name in vain, but Gemma, your story was so powerful and resonates to me. I've had 2 children after a long journey with infertility, and the experiences that I had in maternity, particularly after my second child, have scarred me and have really impacted me, but also driven me to support the change as well. And I think, again, what's important is that these inequalities that we're seeing amongst Black women, other minority ethnic women in maternal outcomes is not new. And when we talk about health inequalities, I always want to highlight that health inequalities are systematic, avoidable, and unfair differences. We should not be settling for them. We need to address them. And it's really important to kind of have that driven into us. But also it's a result of unequal distribution of socioeconomic and environmental conditions that are needed for health. So not everyone has the same opportunity for health, and that is so important. And when we think about the Black experience in maternal outcomes, I think you can't dismiss racism and structural racism and the different levels of racism that we experience. And Dr. Joseph really articulated this beautifully in terms of, and I love this work by Prof. Williams, who I know works in the NHS Race Observatory. This work really guided me in terms of thinking about how racism translates into poorer health outcomes. And essentially, individual discrimination, institutional, perceived discrimination, all impact us physically and psychologically. And these all then impact our involvement in wider life, in education and housing, etc. And these all impact our health outcomes. So we cannot deal with the differences that we're seeing without acknowledging and responding to racism that we know and we all experience. And I think when we're thinking about how we respond to it, I think about the 4 A's of health equity. So we've got to acknowledge that these inequalities exist. We've got to advocate for those that are effective, exactly as CAHN is doing today. and amplify exactly as we're doing today, but also activate those that are affected by these inequalities so that they can advocate for themselves as well. And for me, in this these next few minutes, is as a clinician and working in sexual health, I really love these diagrams by Public Health England, because what they do is that they highlight that there are many opportunities in our life that we can be supported to make better health decisions and support that preconception. And it comes from the start of life, as I've mentioned, with that association with obesity and how that moves forward, but it is in school education, community being pivotal to that. But also thinking about, as we access sexual health, when we're doing our cervical screening, as we're looking at how to do a healthy adult lifestyle, these all are important in that in preconception. And when we look at all this, look at a life, there are different emerging risks that as you interact with each healthcare professional, they should be also aware of this and advocated to support us through this. And I've just highlighted some of these groups here because I think that whilst we talk about what we need to do as communities, it's also about advocating for other services to recognise what we experience and respond as well. And I just want to end with a case that I wanted to highlight, Michaela, who was seen at the sexual health clinic at age 17, and she's from the DRC, and she left care was leaving care the next year. And she had a really difficult life and had faced lots of discrimination. And her mother didn't know her mother, her father had died, and she had been taken care by her grandmother. But at age 14, her grandmother unfortunately developed Alzheimer's, and so she had to go into care. In care, she was sexually assaulted and she had a really difficult time, but despite all of this, was doing amazingly academically. And other risk factors that were noted was that she was a smoker, she had a normal BMI, and she was coming in because it was her first sexual experience, when I say consensual sexual experience, and she was requesting contraception, and she was given the depot. And right there, on reflection, when I look at her, I think about her age, I think about her adverse childhood events, I think about her mental health and what she'd been through. And these are all things that needed to be recognised to support her in her next phase of life. But they weren't directly addressed in the consultation. It was addressed at a distance. And then she was seen a number of years later, and she was attending for recurrent thrush. And in terms of her life update, she was a heavier smoker, her raised BMI, she'd had a new partner who was really supportive, and she was studying accounting, but had sorry for the spelling mistake there, she'd had different difficult times in her studies with lots of discrimination that she'd been experiencing. And then also, she had been relying on her partner for finances, and he'd recently lost her job, so there were financial difficulties. And she'd also developed more severe anxiety and missed her Depo-Provera appointments. So when she was coming to me, she had recurrent thrush, but actually she had a positive PT, and this was unplanned. So all these other factors of being a smoker, obesity, and worsening mental health were highlighted. And she continued with that pregnancy. And the baby did have a low birth weight, but I still know Michaela, and baby is doing well, but it was a really difficult time. But she also experienced quite severe postnatal depression. And at that time, it made me think about, were there missed opportunities for really acknowledging the trauma that she'd been in, acknowledging the weathering that was described by Dr. Joseph previously of that physical impact of racism, how she was supported in terms of her mental well-being, and how there could have been more to build her resilience, and also just giving her physical health advice and preparing her for future plans of pregnancy, and even raising that discussion. And she was seen at 8 months postpartum and was given long-acting contraception, and then future pregnancy and planning advice. So in the integrated sexual health clinic, I have been advocating that we've got to discuss this when people are initiating contraception, also when people are discontinuing long-term contraception, but also thinking of further opportunities in different settings as well. And just to tie it all together, really, I think that there are a number of opportunities in which that we can support people and improve in what we're doing. Education and training, particularly for those health and social care professionals about unconscious bias and cultural humility. Thinking about looking at women on the racial lens, that intersectionality and importance of lived experience, but just thinking about being birth justice and us all being accountable. And I've been advocating for developing patient-reported outcome measures, capturing patient experience in relation to bias and discrimination across all specialties, and not just maternal care, but specialties such as mine. But it is about working in partnership, it is about advocacy and taking this whole systems perspective, but also research as well, making sure that we are, as women, as Black women, as minority women, as all women, part of the research agenda so we can bring on change. And I'm really mindful of time, so I'm going to stop there and thank you so much. And then I'm really happy to share my slides with a bit more detail as well. Thank you.
Gosh, Vanessa, thank you so much for that. That was absolutely brilliant. The energy you've brought to this, and the hope, and the direction that you're going in, and others, is fantastic. It really is. It lifted my spirits. Anita, over to you. There you are. That's fantastic. You're with us. You need to take yourself off mute so that we can hear you. Okay, thank you. Well done.
Hi, can you hear me now?
I can. Lovely. Thank you. Welcome.
Perfect. Hi, thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I'm just so happy to be a part of this Women's Day, and I just want to share my story with you guys. So I'm a new mum. Well, when I say new mum, my son is 1 year old now. He's called Daniel, but Daniel came very, very early. He was born at 27 weeks. He weighed just below a kilo. And yeah, it was just a stressful time for me, as you can imagine, having a baby at 27 weeks. So I was taken into hospital with severe cramps, and then I was expecting to go home on that day, but then it turned out that I was actually experiencing labor cramps. And then that's when I was told that I was gonna deliver a baby, and I wasn't even prepared. I hadn't even done anything for Daniel. But the experience in hospital, it wasn't so great, if I'm honest with you. The way that I was treated, I feel like, was just, I didn't know what was going on. As you can imagine, in giving birth to at 27 weeks, I expected more support from, the healthcare professionals, but I was sort of left to it. And the consultants, they sort of helped me, through, giving birth and stuff, but it was afterwards. And I think also because of COVID, I just didn't get the support that I really, really needed. So I had to take Daniel home when he was just below 2 kilo. And then they said to me, he's got to, when he reaches a certain weight, that's it, you've got to, we've got to discharge you, basically, is what I was told. So took him home, and after that, there was no support at all. I would ring, my health visitor to sort of find out what was happening. Is Daniel growing the way he's supposed to? I didn't know all that. So it was really, really a difficult time for me. And also the racism that I was experiencing prior to me going into labor. So basically, I lived in Blakely before. So I had a group of youths just coming to my house, urinating, doing drugs, pooing on my front door and stuff like that. I reported it to the police, and it was really, really stressing me out. And I think that's part of the reason why I sort of went into early labor as well, because the stress was just overwhelming. And I just felt like there was no support at all. So I would ring like the housing, and then the housing would say to me, well, you need to ring Greater Manchester Police because they deal with crime. But when I rang Greater Manchester Police, they would say, it's Northwards, they deal with antisocial behaviour. So there was no support up until I was in hospital when I was admitted with all these cramps. And during my admission as well, they burned down my house, and I don't know why, but yeah, I don't know why they chose me. Maybe because of my skin color, or I don't know. But yeah, so anyway, that's basically what happened. But Daniel is doing fine at the moment. He still has a few health issues, which I still feel like I could do with a lot of support, but it's only now that he's being referred to different services, because I was getting support from CAHN, which I think it's a good thing to get support, but I think that healthcare professionals should sort of just do their job. That's why they're there. If you need support with anything, I don't see any reason why somebody else should be your voice, if that makes sense. The only reason I feel that they're acting now is because CAHN is sort of involved now. So yeah, that's basically it, my story. Thank you.
Anita, thank you so much for sharing that. You've got such a beautiful smile and a lovely face.
Thank you so
and
much.
All that, seriously, and all that you've been through, I would have been crushed, I have to tell you. And, you know, thank you for sharing that with us today, because what you have said, and you've said it incredibly well, and would have destroyed a lot of people, actually, to be honest with you.
Can I just say, though, that, sorry to interrupt you, that I'm really, really grateful for Faye and Dr. Charles as well, for all the support that they've, you know, shown, that they've given me throughout last year and this year. And they've really, really, honestly, I'll start getting emotional if I just carry on. So I'm just going to leave it there. But honestly, I'm really, really grateful for everything that you've done for me. If you're listening, Dr. Charles, Faith, thank you so much for your support, for supporting Daniel as well. And for getting us this far as well. Thank you so much.
And I wish you well going forward, you and Daniel, and that you get the care and the help you need and you deserve, actually. And I know you will, because you've got Charles and Faye on your side. We're running really quite late now, and I'm going to do I'm actually going to take a bit of a license, chair's license, I think. I personally would like to hear the pre-recorded song, At Last. And the reason why I'd like to hear it is because At Last is my favorite song ever. I don't know if you guys have heard it. You must have heard it when Barack Obama and his gorgeous wife Michelle were dancing when they actually, the inauguration was, gosh, when was that, 2008 or something like that. But I just thought it'd be really nice to have a song, because it's International Women's Day. It is supposed to be a joyous celebration. I think we've heard some really heartrending and troubling testimonies, and it would be really great to hear that.
The night I looked to you, that I could speak to, a dream that I have never known. I found a thrill to press my cheek to, a thrill that I have never known. Oh yeah, when you smile, and then all spells are cast. Now here we are in heaven, for you are mine.
That was absolutely brilliant. That was so fantastic. Oh, wow. Thank you so much for playing that. That was just wonderful. What a wonderful, wonderful way to actually spend our International Women's Day together, thinking about the issues that really impact on us as women, being here as women. And I know there are some men here. They say behind every woman and all of that, but I'm not 100% sure that that's the truth. Over to you. I've introduced you already, CAHN, and said how fabulous you are. You work at Imperial, doing all sorts of wonderful things. So great to have you here now. I'm really looking forward to hearing this. Over to you.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much, everybody. And apologies for me popping in and popping out. I hope you can now see my screen clearly. And I'm probably just going to really say that it's been a fantastic day. Well done to this great charity that's really showcased not just the problems, but solutions to bring change. And I'm really, and this slide is just to make us really think, not to lose the momentum of why we need to bring this change in and why it's possible for the change to be made. So first of all, I just want to make you all aware. So there will be people on the call and people you will always meet that will say to you that racism doesn't exist in the UK. And it doesn't exist to any particular level. So this lovely slide is taken from a study that was done a few years ago, really asking mothers and fathers, are you happy for your child to marry a Black person? So if you get to the darker green, that tells you you're between 90 to 100%. If you get down to the darker red, that's 10 to 19%. So essentially, if you look on the map of the world, there is nowhere where people say they're 100% happy for their child to marry a Black person, other than the obvious places like Africa that perhaps were taken out of this study. And if you even look at the UK, yes, we can say that we're better than perhaps some other places across the world. However, we're still about 80% are happy. So that means in a room of 10 people, you will have 2 that will not want their child to marry a Black person. And that's what I want you to understand. And that is the tip. That is the strongest form, well, not perhaps the strongest form of racism, but that's a particular strong form of racism. There will be other people with slightly lesser sort of racist tendencies, but I just want you to hold that thought. So for all the people that think racism doesn't exist, this study wasn't performed by Black people. This was a general study that was talked about to find out how people pursued racism. Very, very interesting. So actually, the infection perhaps that we shouldn't be worried about so much, well, I shouldn't really say that because COVID is very concerning and has affected a lot of us, but there is another infection called racism.
What makes 2 days don't block off?
So would we say, is it simply socioeconomic? Is it just actually because we are just and eat better? Is it down to life choices? Is it simply health education? Is it simply structural racism? Actually, it's probably a combination of everything. But we can start to chip and take away that everything a bit at a time if we start to think differently about the problem. So rather than just buttonholing it or just putting it into a box and saying It is what it is. You know, it's all about people not owning their own healthcare. Let's change our pattern of thought. Yes, I know I've put an older white man up on the screen, Albert Einstein, very famous scientist, but even what he said was very key. Without changing our pattern of thought, we will not be able to solve the problems we've created with our current patterns of thought. We need to reinvent and rethink about things in a different way. What if the mother's mortality was dictated by treatment in society? Make that a null hypothesis. I know that when I had my first child, I went into hospital. At the time, the midwife, I was actually breached, my waters had gone. I was in labour for over 24 hours. I had not been monitored at all. They put me on the ward because they were too busy on the labour ward. When I went up to speak to the midwife at the desk and said, oh, I haven't been monitored, I thought I was being very humble about it. I wasn't complaining. I'd been there for probably like 20 hours. She just replied to me, is your baby kicking? And I said, yeah. She goes, well, then you know it's alive then, don't you? So imagine that stress that it would have caused to me at that point in time. The fear I had for myself in the hands of this woman, nobody else could see how she was treating me, and for my unborn child that was still within me. So that's why we have to talk about racism. We're like, oh, do you want to talk about racism? Oh, not really. I don't really want to talk about it. All right, let's talk about something more pleasant. Okay. No, and then you're like, actually, maybe it's not okay. Not talking about racism is a big reason why it's such a problem. Yeah, you're right. So do you want to talk about racism? No, not really. And I know I'm probably speaking to the converted on this call at the moment, but actually talking about it is liberating. I'm a woman who embraces all cultures and backgrounds. You know, my best friends from New Zealand and my other best friends from Croatia, we call ourselves sisters. We say that when God created us, he put us with the same serial number, but we're different colored skins. I've got red hair, I've got blonde hair, dark hair. What unites us is that we are one of the human race, and we should be able to talk about the different things that actually make us better. Our differences that celebrate who we are, that are absolutely, fantastic. The richness of different cultures that come together to merge to make the one human race. We are not divided, we are together. Therefore, I would say that actually talking about race is more powerful. I've had 2 children. I've grown up in the west part of London. I've got a son who's 20, a daughter who's 13. Both of them, as you can imagine, they're 7 years apart. I've got a daughter in between who's 16. I must add her in. But if you imagine 7 years apart, both of them experienced the same thing in reception class. Younger kids saying to them, I don't want to play with you because you're black. Is that a feature of their parents being racist? And this is what we also need to address. Perhaps not. To a certain proportion, they could be that 2 out of the 10 that we talked about at the beginning, but they could just be the other part who've actually never really had the conversations. So therefore, it reinforces things within children's minds, and they come to draw their own conclusions. And they would draw their own conclusions. I can tell us another story about race. Me as a young doctor dropping my kids off at nursery, being told to stand by the side of the road by these sort of police community officers because he felt I had parked wrongly, and being told to stand, take my hands out of my pocket, interrogating me piece by piece. What are you doing here? Are you known to the police? What are you doing? What do you think the children inside the nursery could see if they saw me standing by the car? And that's the issue when you hear people talking in the press about black people being stopped. Because you may say be a black person being stopped by the road, but it may be me. I have been stopped so many times. I'm a black professional who drives a nice car so many times, and everybody who sees me when I'm being stopped will presume I've done something wrong, but nothing has ever come out of any of those events. But it reinforces that information for the people who surround that black people are bad, or there's something wrong with black people. And even if it's not them verbally communicated, the non-verbal communications that stream down into my kids not being played with really start to embed and really enforce the stereotype that black people are poor, that we're victims, that all, about slavery. We keep talking about slavery so much, and that's fine. Let's talk about slavery, but let's talk about what people have accomplished now and how we've come through that. And that's made us sort of a resilient culture, a resilient place. So there we come back to the George Floyd. I mean, this is why we're here. It wasn't that all this stuff wasn't being talked about. It's been talked about for decades. But George Floyd is at the big top of this iceberg, is a deliberate attempt. Let's go down. You know, if you look at all the other violence, discrimination, acts of bias, biased attitudes, which continually affect and start to pierce the hearts and the souls of people who have this inflicted upon them. So let's come back to the British kind of racism. I've definitely been there and had it down. It's a passive, aggressive and subtle. It's done so well, it's difficult to provide evidence for. It's not the the killing that occurs of people perhaps to a higher extent in America, although it does occur here in the UK. But it's difficult to provide evidence for. People are therefore become reluctant to report them because it always turns back on them. They're hard to prove, the aggressive Black woman, the aggressive Black man, and those who do bite the bullet and report it, so their complaint was rarely taken seriously. And we see this all the way through the NHS. For those of you who don't know, I've loved reading this book by Yomi Adejoke, Slay in the Lane, the Black Girl Bible. But the saddest thing about reading is that I am almost 50. These are young women who are probably 30 years behind me. And in the book, they report things which were as if it was yesterday and nothing has changed. So although people think it's changed, it hasn't. It's actually very, very sad. What is a racial microaggression? Microassaults are the most explicit, intentional, old-fashioned racism, deliberately serving the white person first rather than the Black person at a restaurant. For example, when I, probably, when I buy my car, probably about 6 months ago, I try and go and buy a car from the Audi showroom. I'm told to sit down. First time, actually, they told me, oh, no, you can't come in. Then they realized, actually, I've got an appointment, so I can come in. I need to sit down. And then a white family after white family is ushered in ahead of me, and I'm just left ignored to one side while they try to prove that I've got my driving license so I can take the car out. Essentially, what then actually happens at the end of it is that they decide that all the white families that didn't have reports, appointments that came in before me actually went to go and see the car that I had booked to see. And then when it's my turn, it's like, oh, you can go off and have a look at it. I'm not giving anybody to go with me and go look at the car. Needless to say, I went to Range Rover and bought a lovely car with a lovely person who took good care of me the same day. But that is what you call a micro assault. And there are micro insults, the more unconscious subtle form. Oh, Karen, wow, you're so articulate. You're the whitest Black person I know. In which the micro insult associates qualities they like with me with being white. No, I'm very Black through and through, and I'm very happy to be Black. I'm very proud of it. Micro invalidations, comments that subtly exclude or nullify you. So when I'm there training as a young doctor and I'm saying, oh yeah, my family used to take me to New Forest. Are you sure you went to New Forest? I said, yeah, I went to this place. And I said, that's not in the New Forest. That's a way to exclude me from the social interaction in the workplace, to make sure that I know I am not part of that group. I'm not part of that cultural or social background. That's a micro invalidation. They're potentially more harmful because they're insidious and the difficulty when trying to confront and perpetrate about them. I can just be seen as silly. The health inequality. So what's the cost? You can talk about direct racism. So we can talk about sickle cell disease. And it really saddened me to take care of a lady on the weekend. And I don't give a talk like this very often because it makes me very tearful. To discover that sickle cell disease patients do not even have medical exemption certificates for prescriptions. I've got thyroid disorder, even I get medical exemption. Somebody with a chronic illness to that extent. And I was speaking to the patient and she was telling me how she tried twice to get up to 30,000 signatures as a petition just to sign for them to debate it in Parliament, and it has never occurred. This is a group we know have chronic disability, no disability payments. So that is a real health inequality. You've already set them off on the back foot. Mental health, we know about overtreatment. And quite sadly, even in the middle of the COVID pandemic, my sister works as a psychotherapist. She was telling me about meetings where they had psychiatrists crying on Zoom calls, recognizing actually, yes, they've been taught for years to give more medication to Black people, and they knew it had increased side effects of catatonia, extrapyramidal side effects where they're shaking, because they were told that Black people were quite hard to treat. So overprescription of medication. Maternity, lack of research, it's been going on for years. We knew that Black people are more likely to die. I bought into the narrative of socioeconomic, and I just really want people to understand that that's not a factor. When you look at it and take out socioeconomic effects, it remains that Black women are more likely to die. When I go into my hospital with my best friend, who's white with red hair, I'm 4 times more likely to die. And I know that's the case because my son almost died from pneumonia after me going to A&E 3 times. We were not taken seriously. And whether that's a reflection on our education systems, I will come on to. Cancer care, we know there are poorer outcomes. We haven't even talked about neonatal survival. That's not even publicized. We do not address the fact that Black and Asian mothers are more, their babies are more likely to die. We haven't talked about child deaths. We haven't talked about, to a certain extent, we talked about preterm birth. These are all real serious issues. If you go and look at the statistics, they are shocking. So I believe that maternity just highlights one thing that's going on, which is the biological weathering, which has been alluded to on many parts of this talk today. And biological weathering is this, and I recognize it, and when I saw Professor David Williams' research on racism and discrimination and how they impact on health, again, the King's Fund, just write it down, go and have a look. This research, these figures have been going on for 5 years or more, longer than that even. It predates so much of George Floyd. But what we should be thankful of is that we have now a platform to talk and to really start to address this. So if we look at the science behind it, if we look at aging, it's not simply about the wrinkles on our skin, because that might be a factor of how good the cream is that we use. I must say Murad is a really good cream if you're thinking about a good cream to use. But it's also related to what's happening to our genes inside. The telomeres are the parts of your chromosome on the end, and they become shortened with a length over time, and they are an indication of age, which then relates to general health of an individual. So this is the bit that we will lose with age, the bits on the end. So cells divide over time, they're dividing, they're trying to repair. So think about it, that cells divide more when they're repairing, when they're growing. So you've got the growth and they've got repair. So why are they having to repair more? Are we having more shock or oxidative stress upon our bodies? That means cells are having to repair and divide more. I think yes. So we unfortunately, as Black women, have an accelerated biological aging of about 7.5 years, which is really quite sad. So I myself, despite my best intentions I've managed to lose a stone over lockdown. I do all my HIIT training. I remember being enrolled in a study about resilience at Imperial. Essentially, it was an opportunity to be wired up to these special wires that check you. And I thought I'd better do this because I'm doing quite a lot of work and I just want to make sure that I understand my own health. Long and short of it, it's had a busy week. I even broke my toe in that week, all sorts of things and have you. But when I eventually put the report back, it looks at your sympathetic versus your parasympathetic system. Sympathetic, fight or flight, stress response. Parasympathetic, your calming response. And the man kept calling me up, Karen. I'm like, yeah, you need to come in. We need to look at this. And essentially what he said to me is that it's one of the worst reports he's ever seen because my sympathetic system never came down. So that's my fight or flight response. Now, I wasn't particularly stressed in myself, but obviously along the way, I had lots of little incidents that I was dealing with. When I broke my toe and I went to A&E, I was completely dismissed because I sat there as if I wasn't in pain and I wasn't about to create a fuss. In fact, when they then did the x-ray after they sent me to the GP a few hours later, they were shocked and quickly hushed me back to say, I'm really sorry, you should have been offered, I wasn't offered pain relief. You know, all this stuff that we talk about in the press about Black people not getting offered pain relief, it's the same thing, you know. And this, in its sense, has led to what I would say is an accelerated biological aging. This woman, I really wanted to salute her and just to say to you all, we have to recognize where we've got our allies. She's the lady called Geronimus at the bottom of that slide. She's a lady in America who worked out at Princeton University and could have sat in her snowy white peak tower and enjoyed her life. But she went out into communities where she could see young Black mothers were having babies, where people kept throwing contraception at them and saying they needed to stop having children. But what she recognized, that it wasn't simply about them not having children, she recognized they were having poor outcomes, and she started to do the work and look at the telomere effects and the aging effects and what we call a metabolic change within these women. So I just wanted to salute this woman. I think she's now, unfortunately, I think she's passed away now, particularly on the International Women's Day, to say thank you for standing up for Black women. So it's a cumulative impact of repeated exposure to psychological stressors within your social environment. So we're not necessarily talking about things that happen at home or wherever, we're just talking about within the living. Like I myself am a Black woman, I know I've got a Black son. You know, when he goes out, how do I worry? What do I think about where he is? How do I think about my Black kids having gone through COVID? I know my daughter's an academic scholar. She should have got straight nines. She didn't get straight nines because she was assessed by white teachers who would not see her true potential. She didn't get a chance to do an exam. That's a whole nother level. We haven't even talked about the effect of COVID on the GCSEs and A-levels of Black and brown children who we know historically are always under marks in class and actually get a chance to prove teachers wrong in the exam setting. That was my story. Genetic resets, because the metabolic effect will then turn on certain genes on or off and lead you to disease predisposition, including weight gain. So your stress response leads to a raise in cortisol, which can raise blood pressure, leads to altered glucose homeostasis and weight retention, and the cycle goes round. So rather than just saying people are more likely to have an increased BMI, all these Black and brown people are not eating properly, they're just putting on weight. But why is the weight retention there? So there are 10 biomarkers that lady looked at, and she could pick up within the system of these women, these young girls who were like, you know, they were young. We're talking about 17, 18, but their bodies acted as if they were aged. Systolic blood pressure, diastolic blood pressure, body mass index, glycated hemoglobin, which is the glucose that attaches onto the hemoglobin that tells you if you've got diabetes, albumin, which relates to your kidneys, and creatinine clearance, which is your kidneys. So we're talking about kidney disease. Triglycerides, the fats in the blood, we're talking about cardiovascular disease. CRP, we're talking about inflammatory disorders, autoimmune disorders. Homocysteine, again, another regulation within our metabolism, and our total cholesterol. So look at this, you've got this perceived stress. So we feel this threat, this helplessness, we have this vigilance. You actually have to be a bit heightened. You can't just go to the shop and just act in the way other people act. I have to tell my kids to be careful, don't do that in that way. Somebody may think you're stealing something. And these are real conversations that lots of Black and brown people have. It then leads you to have a behavioral response. So we've got to look at the psychological effect. So for some people, they want to de-stress through their diet, smoking, drinking, exercise. There's no doubt about that. So through their, the choices that they make. You then get a physiological response, which is what we call leads to your allostatic load. So what load is there on your body of all this? You then have individual differences, the genes, the development experience that affect how you have that perceived stress. You have a physiological response. You can see all these things that impact on you lead to what you as an individual have within your own system, and it's called the allostatic load. So it will define your blood pressure, body mass index. So myself, I sit here as a professional Black woman, but I know I've had a load. I had to apply to medicine 5 times before I got in. I had to do a bachelor's degree. Then I had to do a master's degree before I was allowed to medicine. And even then I was put onto a reserve list. When I finally got into medical school, I won all the most of the prizes in the first year. So I put it to you that the delay in me getting into medical school was not due to my academic ability. It was due to my skin color. Racism causes aging and it causes biological damage. Race still matters for health after social economic factors are taken out. Poverty is not the cause. And I want you to really hold that thought. High levels of exposure to stress, financial, work, community, discrimination, microaggressions, media lead to premature aging and biological damage. The effect on the Black man, we haven't even talked about, is the effect on the Black woman, because Black men are less likely to succeed up the ladder. So therefore it creates this financial stress within the family and are more likely to break. It's not about Black fathers not wanting to take care of their children. In fact, some Black fathers have been cited actually to be more hands-on. I, as a Black woman, have many Black friends. I actually don't know anybody who doesn't know their father. But that's, again, a media propaganda and a stereotypical thing that's been taken on. And in the same way that there are white families that break up, Black families break up. But actually, really get to know your facts. Is it more or less? Again, the racism that perpetuates that Black people use more drugs, that again is not necessarily true. In fact, it's more white, middle class, upper class people that may use more drugs than Black people. And we need to recognize that. I have my kids complaining about their friends using drugs and wanted to stay away from them because I live in quite a higher class area of, well, anyway, I will not comment on that. So racism. So we have, I've drawn this line. I'm really sorry, I forgot to actually give the, I got it off the internet. And I thought it was really good in the way that it kind of like translates through all these. And what I loved about it is that we've considered all this to be a factor in the outcomes of Black people. But I love this arrow that it says that racism directly just causes this, because it does. Leads to cardiovascular disease, increases gestational diabetes, preeclampsia, and adverse pregnancy outcomes. And definitely that's a summary that racism is toxic for health. So racism is toxic for the fetus as well, because in the same way we look at perinatal mental health, you know, and I've loved working in that field, and I work with Maria who's on the call on that. We understand that, and all the mapping has been done to know that the way, if your stress level is set, it can reset the circuitry within that baby. So the baby's levels are also altered. And I believe it's the same for racism. So therefore, the intergenerational stress can get translated across the baby. So it increases the chance of diabetes, increases the chance of blood pressure, because that fight or flight response, that sympathetic nervous system is raised, and it's more within the, it's set to a slightly different level within that child. And so therefore we have what we call the outer low static load and the pathophysiology. And this is not actually a racism slide. I just want you to be aware of that. That's something that somebody has recognized about epigenetics. But if you look at this, the major life event, environmental stressors, trauma and abuse, and if you remember that every 2 in 10 people you meet will have a slightly different response to you if you're Black or brown, that is significant in your lifetime. So that means even in the classroom, if you're in a class, you will meet maybe 6 people in the class that will give you sort of little snide comments to your child. And I love this slide again, because it's really just summarizes the preterm birth effect, because increased inflammatory disease, neurological dysregulation, that's talking about, as I was saying, the 2 nervous systems not working well, so you're more a stress system, the diabetes that will then affect intrauterine growth restriction, cardiovascular disease, obesity, and preeclampsia. Again, another slide, which is just, I'm just really just trying to embed this for people to understand about this epigenetic signature. And epigenetics really has taken on a whole new field. It is a big field that started up probably about 10, 11 years ago. And you'll see lots of work on this that really talks about how there's pre-programming that occurs in the womb. So we need to break the cycle, and there's been some fantastic resources and discussions that have been had today with regards to that. This is my last slide, and it's hashtag choose the challenge. So let's recognise the genetic program that occurs, and let's break the cycle. Let's work together to change the story of the future children. Education is key, but I also strongly believe well-being is the key, that we can reverse the metabolic change, not just by education of health, but by instituting waypoints. Continuity of carer, why does it work well? Is because it reduces the stress load of mothers, generally, of any colour or background. It allows them to engage more with their pregnancy, reduces that allostatic load, so that the outcome for that pregnancy is better. It's not simply about somebody listening. Why do the women birth better when they've got that one-to-one care? It's the same reason. It's all that. Let's stop disconnecting the physical from the mental as well, and just realise how the psychological impact of racism can be reversed by inputting psychological resources that really buffer and take away from that damage. Let's reverse the metabolic change. So thank you, everybody. I think that I've come to the end.
Karen, that was awesome. I mean, that was absolutely fantastic. Just really, honestly, I don't even know what to say. It was brilliant, and I am so pleased that you stayed and did it. And I have to tell you that 88 people stayed on the line to listen to you. So, you know, people just didn't disappear. That was brilliant. Oh my God, I feel so privileged and proud.
I have so much respect for you, though, for what you've done historically.
It works both ways, darling. That was amazing. I mean, I will be calling on you forevermore now to go and do talks all over the place, because that was superb. And so thank you so much, and thank you to everybody for staying on to listen to Karen, because that was a masterclass actually in what happens to people of color, Black and brown people across our world actually, when they are subjected to discrimination, the slights, the big events, the small events, all of those things that impact on you physiologically, not only psychologically. And what disturbed me most was about you when you went and had your check, and your resting levels were not as high. Because I've read research about the fact that Black people do not have as deep sleep and as deep a rest, and their bodies are working much more. But on that note, can I thank you so much, all you fantastic and fabulous women that are on the line. We are phenomenal. We are women. We are, you know, women. Without us, what would this world be? And when you look around and you see the types of women that we have in positions of power and authority, and how fantastic and fabulous some of them are. I'm thinking of Jacinta Ardern down in New Zealand, how she has managed this pandemic compared to some men, and how some of the women that we know and we love have worked tirelessly to get us to where we are. That's Black women and white women. So today is about celebrating women and understanding our place, our worth, our value, who we are. And actually, women are we are the ones that bring on the next generation. And if we have healthy women, we're going to have healthy babies and a healthy future. So all of you on the line that are midwives, gynecologists, you know, looking after children, health visitors across the board, you know, all power to your elbow. I wish you all well and a fantastic International Women's Day. God bless you. Take good care and goodbye. Thanks a lot.